Hi, I'm Doug Fields, and I so appreciate your willingness to take some time to learn and to grow as a leader. I know you have lots of commitments every day, and taking some time to sharpen your youth ministry skills really says a lot about you and your commitment to teenagers, so thank you. I want to spend a little time talking about being a small group leader. I've been leading small groups of teenagers for 3 decades, and it can be intimidating and challenging. You're making a commitment to set aside some time out of your busy schedule to love on teenagers and point them toward Jesus, and that's a big commitment. And I know many small group leaders who they actually walk away from their small group shaking their heads and they're thinking, did I even accomplish anything at all tonight? Well, unfortunately, the idea of small groups is a lot easier than the reality of small groups. We have high expectations of our time when we meet with teenagers. We want them to experience a powerful relational connection. We want them to be theologically informed and profound. And ultimately, we want teenagers to be different as a result of this time when we meet together as a small group. And the good news is that there's going to be times of spiritual breakthroughs. Maybe those times where somebody breaks down, they cry, and everybody huddles together and they pray for one another. And you walk away that night and you just think to yourself, thank you, Jesus, for meeting us there tonight. That was so rich and meaningful and powerful. But there's going to be other times when you're in a small group and it appears like nothing's happening. 2 of your students, they're comparing facial hair with each other. You have to try to settle everybody down. Ladies, come on, knock it off. And then, when you're closing your time in prayer, someone thinks it's going to be funny to burp right in the middle of your prayer. And, it actually is funny. And I wish I was making this up. And just so you know, I currently have a small group of high school guys. And, there's some nights when I walk away and I wonder, do I even know anything about youth ministry? And I want you to hear this from me. Being a small group leader is tough, but it is such an important part of youth ministry, and you are making a difference with your time and your life, so thank you. Now, over the years, I have made several observations about leading small groups, and I've learned lessons from some great small group leaders, and I've also learned some lessons from some not so great small group leaders. And I've got a bunch of learnings that I want to pass on to you, but for this video, I'm just going to narrow it down to 2. Okay, 2. The first action that I challenge you to embrace is this: simply talk less. Yep, that's it. Talk less. One of the biggest problems I find with inexperienced youth workers, or even experienced youth workers who aren't skilled at leading small groups, is that they talk too much. There are a couple of things that make this difficult for people. First is the fear of silence. That awkward silence where you ask a question and in return you get nothing but glazed faces and you wonder if they even heard you. So the temptation in that moment is to end the silence and just talk more. You want to provide the answer to your own question, so you fill up this gaping silence. But when we do that, we actually keep students from thinking on their own. Instead, I would encourage you to turn that awkward silence onto them. You don't have to enjoy the silence, but you can learn to appreciate it. So allow the silence to be there, because eventually someone's going to crack and the conversation will begin to flow. See, they may not be answering questions because they know that you don't like silence and you're going to answer the question. But for some small group leaders, the problem isn't the awkward silence. The problem is that they just love to talk. They thrive on lecture, and they use their small group format to teach and to give answers and to instruct and to editorialize and show off their theological intelligence. And that may be what a lecturer does, but it's not really what an effective small group leader does. See, students remember very little of lectures, but they remember a lot of what they've discussed and discovered on their own, especially in a small group setting. So the role of a good small group leader is to facilitate the discussion and the exploration of biblical truths. The bottom line is, you talk less and they discuss and discover more. And that's the winning formula. And as someone who's spent most of his life as a communicator, this idea of being quiet, I got to be honest, it's especially difficult for me. See, I can fall into the trap of thinking that if I just explain something the right way, that teenagers will remember it forever. But honestly, this is arrogance on my part. I mean, the goal is not to try to point teenagers toward my brilliance. The goal is to get them engaged with Jesus and to discover His truth on their own. So think for a moment about how much you talk when you're leading a small group and how much your students talk. If most of the words come from your mouth, I'd encourage you to talk less, even if you have to wait for them to talk. As a matter of fact, I think a good rule of thumb is that your students do about 75% of the talking. And as I mentioned, they may have gotten accustomed to you talking a lot, so it may take a little bit of time for them to jump in and share their thoughts, and that's okay. Ask some good questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no, and then sit back and wait for them to speak. Okay? So, number one, talk less. My second tip for being an effective leader of a small group is to actually leave your small group thinking. Yep, that's it. Just leave them thinking. It is possible. Just like you don't have to provide noise for every silent second, you don't have to provide answers to every question. It's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. That's actually a very good question. Why don't we all be looking for an answer this week, and then next week we'll come back and we'll share what we've discovered. So challenge them to think on their own. Or maybe you say something like this. Next week we're going to talk about evil and why God actually allows bad things to happen to good people. I mean, why does a good God allow evil? Maybe God's not good, or maybe He's not all-powerful. Anyway, I want you to think about that this week, and if you get stumped, maybe ask your parents what they think. Now, if you do that, let me just warn you, their parents may actually call you. Hey, what's the answer to that question you asked my kid at the end of small group? And then you just smile because you actually prompted a great question. You forced faith conversations into the home where they should happen more frequently anyway. See, my experience has been the teenagers become more committed to Jesus and more mature in the expression of their faith when they have to struggle with questions and when they aren't given the answers to everything. When they actually have to think through things and think deeply. Okay, that's it. So get them thinking. So let's review. 2 steps to be a more effective small group leader. 1, talk less. And 2, leave them thinking. Now, I've got several more tips, and I'll share them in some future video trainings. And before we finish, let me just say that if you've been discouraged with your small group, or even if you've been on the verge of quitting because you feel like you're not making a difference as a small group leader, please don't give up. See, what I've discovered in ministry is that we almost never see the impact we're having when we're right in the middle of it. Sometimes the rewards or the validation of our time comes a lot later. And so I want to encourage you to trust that Jesus is using your faithfulness to sow seeds into young lives, that even if you can't see it right now, you're not wasting 1 second of your service for Him. So rest assured, you're doing a great job. Please don't give up. And thank you for watching this, and thanks for following Jesus and caring about teenagers.